Hello, everybody. So great to be here and have you here with us. I think there's a reasonable case to be made that many of us might not be here at a conference on the circular economy, or let alone one called Circularity, without the pioneering work of Ellen MacArthur and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. For the past 10 years, they've been leading the way, not just popularizing the term, but providing the research, the metrics, the vision, along with companies, government agencies, universities, and others, but what it will take to move this thing called the circular economy along. So it's with great, great pleasure that I welcome to Circularity Dame Ellen MacArthur. Hey, Ellen, it's so great to see you again.
Hi, Joel. Good to see you too.
So here we are in this amazing, unprecedented, terrifying moment, and I'm wondering how you view circularity in this moment.
I think you can't really talk about this moment without getting an understanding of the impact that this is having on the world. And there's the economic impact, there's the impact to countries, but there's also the individual impact. And I think very few of us are not connected somehow to someone who's lost someone through COVID. So I think they're tragic times and disturbing times. But with all of these, we always try and pull out the positive. And right now, with regards to circular economy, I think the interesting thing is the conversations are getting stronger. I think the dialogue has never been better between government and business when it comes to building back better and moving forward out of this situation. It's uncharted territory. Nobody's been in this situation before economically, from a health perspective, from an individual perspective. We're all wondering where this is all going to go, but the dialogue is incredibly strong. And there's a real will to move on and find out how we can get out of this. And I think the dialogue between governments and business in particular is very, very important with regards to circular economy and moving forwards.
Well, of course, the other thing that's going on, certainly here in the States, but all around the world, is this focus on social justice, which of course incorporates economic justice, climate justice, racial justice, criminal justice. And I'm wondering how that is entering into the conversation about circularity.
I think one thing that's interesting with regards to circular economy is we've always talked about diversity, strength in diversity. It's diverse, it's distributed. It involves lots of different players of different sizes, the big corporates, but also the individuals. And I think this way of drawing what the circular economy looks like, this way of painting that circular picture, it shows that it's not all about the one end of the pyramid. I think that, when we talk about capitalism, there's this there's one end of the pyramid. This is all about, making more money and growth and the top end of that pyramid. But I think with circular economy, we talk about diverse and distributed. This is a different way of looking at things. If you imagine a forest, there are plants of all sizes. There are the huge trees in the rainforest. There are the tiny little plants. There are the microscopic fungi. And actually, all of these parts play a very important role in the health of that part of the forest. And take one away and everything else crumbles. I think the circular economy is the same, that it's about diverse, it's about distributed. We can't say that we can tick every single box when it comes to all the challenges around social justice, but I certainly think when it comes to diverse and distributed and a more equal spread of employment, of wealth, then I think there are some very important elements there within circular economy for sure.
Well, but one part of this has always been around economic development and job creation, and throughout the world there are millions and millions of people, tens of millions or maybe even hundreds of millions of people who are in that informal economy, picking waste from landfills or picking resources from landfills really and turning them back into circulation. Are we starting to see some ways that those members of our population can become part of the circular economy, or is that still to be determined later on?
I think certainly when it comes to the jobs or the informal jobs that you mentioned, Joel, when it comes to picking from landfill, I think one of the challenges with that sector right now is that a lot of what's in that landfill is absolute rubbish. I mean, it's never designed to have any value. It's never designed to be anything other than waste once it's done its initial job. And when you look at the work we've been doing around plastics, about redesigning the plastic system, every piece of plastic that's produced has value. So of course, those people who recover that value will play an absolute part in the system. And there's some very ambitious targets to 2025 that we've been working towards with the UN Environment Programme, through the Global Commitment, with some of the biggest corporate players in the world, including the country pacts around plastic packaging. There's been some significant progress made towards those 2025 goals, and they are hard goals, and they're changeable targets that we can shift, and they're also measured. So as we progress towards 2025, as we see the system of plastic packaging changing globally, yes, that informal sector will play a much more prevalent role, and perhaps a less informal role.
Well, let's talk about the new plastics economy, and specifically all the companies, whether they've signed on to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation commitment or not, all the companies that made commitments around plastic waste or recycled content or any number of things designed to eliminate plastic waste. We heard a lot of commitments in the last year and a half, maybe 2 years. I haven't heard a lot since then. Do you have a sense that progress is actually moving forward in terms of these big brands, in particular the consumer packaged goods companies and their value chains, actually implementing and starting to move that needle?
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. These are time-bound targets, and we're working very closely with all of the organizations that have signed the global commitment. But this is not something that can happen overnight. It's not a click of a finger. You're looking at redesigning distribution models, redesigning business models. It's not all about the material. It's about how you get that product to the customer. So there have been some huge changes. And I think also when these companies signed on, they didn't have the answer. They knew what they were trying to achieve. We worked together very closely before we even created the global commitment on what has to happen. We need to eliminate the plastic we don't need. We need to innovate for the plastic that we do need. And we need to make sure that once we create that plastic that's been designed innovatively so it fits within a cycle, we need to make sure we do cycle it. So everyone's working towards that, but that doesn't happen overnight. So it's a process. It involves different materials, different distribution models, and setting up the chains. And I think one thing that is a positive from the COVID-19 situation is we've seen changes within industry, changes within business, changes within distribution happen in weeks. In the face of this crisis. And I think people have really got used to having to jump quickly to change a system. And I think there's an upside to that.
Well, maybe you've partly answered the question I was about to ask, which is, what surprised you in this in the plastics commitment and the new plastic economy, both in the good way, the things that are maybe easier or moving faster than you thought, and maybe things that are tougher than you anticipated?
I think single use is a big issue right now, because there's a huge volume of single-use material because of COVID and because of the pandemic going through the system. So the design of that in the future is absolutely critical. When it comes to the general systemic change that's needed for plastic, I think one thing that we've always felt at the foundation is when you create systemic change, even the biggest player out there, they cannot do it on their own. The whole system has to shift. And I think, you could say it's a surprise, it had to happen, but the strength of dialogue between some of the biggest competitors in the world has been strong. We need to do this together. We need to agree together what this plastic packaging system will look like, because 100 innovations in 100 directions had been going on, and it wasn't achieving an outcome that was what we were after. And as we've seen in the recent Pew study, if we continue on the current trajectory, if we don't change anything, we'll double the amount of plastic we're producing by volume by 2040. In 20 years, there's a lot of this stuff going to be out there. So we have to make sure we design it in the right way. And I've been pleasantly surprised by the strength of collaboration between competitors in building that system that can work.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing you brought up, because the growth of plastics, the projected growth of plastics, the number of factories that are growing up, are being built or planned around the world is looking at a massive growth of plastic in the next few decades. And I think there's some people who look at these commitments and look at that growth, those growth projections, and say that maybe the circular economy is a bit of a fig leaf. What would you say to them?
Well, I think we have to change the system so that the system can work. And at the beginning of my own personal journey into this circular space, I was thinking, "Whoa, look at the scale of the problem. This is just insurmountable. Look at plastic packaging." The foundation did the first study looking at the global flows of plastic packaging and found horrific figures. More plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. You think, where do we start? How do we solve this? But that's never going to create a solution. So in order to create the systemic change that's needed, you need to first work out what success looks like. what does a plastic packaging system globally look like that can work? And that's not these tiny sachets that blow away in emerging markets. It has to be plastic that has a value, that has a collectible, recoverable value. And actually, maybe a lot of it is not plastic at all. You know, a global commitment, eliminate the plastic we don't need, innovate for the plastic we do, and then make sure that that is cycled. So working out what success looks like is number one. And yes, we will need plastic. I can't imagine a world where we don't have plastic, but it has to sit within the system. We have to keep it in the economy where it has a value, and a real value if it's correctly designed, and out of the ocean and out of the environment.
Do you think the system wants to be changed?
The system has to change. And I think more than ever, the companies involved in that system, they want to change. You know, when we started the dialogue with them 5-6 years ago, the comment was, no one's really interested in plastic. No one's talking about plastic. This is the big deal is climate change. Climate change is obviously absolutely vital, but the amount of plastic leaking to the oceans is also a really big deal. And the conversation has moved from no one's really interested in plastic to having global commitments, to having, you know, pacts within regions, within countries. This is something that's moved actually really phenomenally quickly in 5 years, because it has to. And I think the brands know it has to, because they don't want to be creating plastic that ends up floating down a river. They want to get their product to the consumer, to the user, to the people. But actually, ultimately, they can't do it on their own. And I think what was needed was everybody has to come together to agree what we design, so that there is a system that this plastic can flow through, be valorized by, and then it go back into that system again.
Yeah, I think that branded waste problem is probably one of the great motivators in moving the circular economy, certainly the plastic waste issue along. You mentioned climate change. And so far, circular economy and climate change are largely treated as separate issues. They're not really connected. And I think you and I both know that's not the case. How are you connecting those dots in ways that companies can understand that by addressing circularity, that they're addressing their climate issues as well?
I think that's actually a very important point. And one thing we have looked at very closely through the foundation is the link between circular economy and climate change, and how circular economy plays a very real role in sticking to those targets. And you know, when you look at the targets, 55% of that can be achieved through switching to renewables, but there's a further 45% that can't. And that's systemic change that's needed in the way we make things, in the embedded energy of products. And when we took just 5 things, we took steel, aluminium, cement, food, and plastic, and we looked at switching to circular principles and practices, and that took half of that remaining 45%, just those 5 things. So circular economy really does play a role in sticking to climate targets and achieving climate targets, because we have to change the system as well as just the energy.
So what are you most excited about right now?
It's a difficult time to be excited, but you know, when you mentioned just earlier, you know, the issue of climate change and the issue of circular economy, I don't see circular economy as an issue. I see it as an opportunity. I think there's a massive opportunity. And right now, the dialogue has never been stronger between business and government. You know, we've had to furlough workers. Look, here in the UK, there's been a very, very strong dialogue between those companies and the government to keep those companies going, to shore up the system so that it doesn't all collapse. And that creates a very strong dialogue. And am I excited? I'm excited about the potential that that offers. I think we are in crisis globally, a health crisis, an economic crisis, but we have never had stronger dialogue, and we have an opportunity here to build back in a different way. And we've seen industries accelerated phenomenally. We've seen perhaps a business model that was due in 5 years be accelerated in 5 weeks. You know, when you look at the online availability, when you look at the distribution of food, when you look at the shifts that have happened, because they've had to happen, that has been extraordinary and unprecedented. And I think that hopefully will set a precedent for how we can do things in the future, and how we can shift quickly and in a light-footed way.
So I get the strength of the dialogue in the UK and in Europe and probably in parts of Asia, but what about in the US side of the pond? Are you hopeful? Are you frustrated? What are you seeing over here?
I mean, I have less insight into that than you do, Joel. So, you know, it'd be interesting to hear your views actually at this point. I would enjoy that. But I think that when I look at some of these challenges, let's just take plastic. we work with the biggest companies in the world that handle plastic packaging. We work with PepsiCo, we work with the Coca-Cola company, we work with all the big guys, the big plastic producers. They're based all over the world. Their head offices are in the US. These are big conglomerates. These are big organizations that work all over the world, that are based in the US, that are fully onto this, that are fully committed to this. So am I hopeful? I am. Yes, there's a political side, but there's also the company side, there's the social side, there's the equality side. As you mentioned, there are citizens all over the world who are looking for a system that works, who are right now perhaps in fear of one that isn't working that well, but they've also seen how quickly things have changed to enable them to get food on the table, to keep that economy functioning. So I would hope there is some faith in that system to keep the economy running, and the fact that that economy can run. So I think it's an interesting one.
It is an interesting one for sure, particularly over here. That's progress for sure, but it feels like it's slow moving. And I know the rest of this event is going to be talking a lot about what's going on and how to get further faster. So we'll have a lot of great conversations that will get to the answer to that question. I guess one big question here is how, we talked about system change and specific to plastic, but what about the system change related to the capitalist and consumption model that we have? It feels in some ways that tilting at windmills here, and that circularity may not be truly possible within the current construct of capitalism. What do you think about that?
I think everything is in flux. So will capitalism be as it is today in 20, 30 years' time? I don't think it will. Nothing ever stays the same forever. There is always flux. But I think one thing that we've seen over the last 10 years is that we've engaged fully with the system as it stands to try to change that. And there is a great willpower out there to shift this system to one which is restorative, regenerative, one which does decouple growth from resource constraints, one which actually, if we can get right, take the food system, we can regenerate natural systems. We can decouple the food system from biodiversity loss. We can build a system that really works. And the faster we do that, the better. The growth in that sector has to happen. There are so many sectors we need growth quickly, and that does in some ways fit with capitalism, but you're building a better system through it. Business is the driver, with the help of government and legislation, is the driver of this circular system. So they play a valuable role in it. This isn't about stepping out of capitalism and saying, let's create something new over here. It's about saying, right, this is the economy. This is driving the world. There are very few people in the world who don't play a part in that, from citizens and people to businesses to governments to all those different parts of society. They all play a role in this. So let's make that work. Let's reorientate that ship to one that's sailing in the right direction, that can run in the long term.
So when you look at the year ahead in terms of obstacles or things that if we could do X over the next 12 months, that would make a big difference. What's X?
X is deciding on what success looks like for me. It's working out what it looks like for the automotive sector, for the industry sector, for the infrastructure sector. We have an opportunity now, right now, like we've not had before, because of something tragic, to build in a different way. I think we have a pretty good idea of the direction of travel at the foundation when it comes to circular economy. I think accepting what that looks like and then making it happen, that for me, that's the step.
Well, making it happen is what you and we are all working towards, and everybody watching is a part of. And again, we can't thank you enough for the vision, for the leadership, for the thinking and the team you've put together, and the inspiration you've given so many of us in moving this movement forward. As I said at the beginning, we owe being here in large part to the work that you have done and the vision that you continue to push forward. Thank you, Ellen, for that, for your time today. Really value and appreciate so much of everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Joel, and thank you for running the conference and for bringing so many people in, because we're going to do this together. This isn't an individual thing, so thank you too.
Great. Dame Ellen MacArthur, thanks again.
Thank you.